Detained Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is dead. That's according to the Russian media. Medical staff have been called to the cell where the Putin critic has been servicing his prison sentence, all trumped up, but authorities were unable to revive him. A cause of death is still being determined. Let's bring in Stuart Varney now, host of Varney & Company, set to take over the reins of Fox Business, a couple of hours, also host of American Built. So Alexei Navalny comes up famously. He has been a big Russian critic, one of the few to survive. He leaves the country, and he gets poisoned. He gets back, gets revived, gets healthy again, and courageously goes back to the country, gets arrested, and has spent the last couple of years in prison.
It just demonstrates the brutality of the Putin regime. This is a brutal dictatorship where no opposition is tolerated at all. Navalny was an opponent, clearly. That's why he's in prison. You got to shut him up. And now he's dead.
The Federal Penitentiary Service says that he felt unwell on Friday after a walk and almost immediately lost consciousness.
Well, I hate to bring it up, but in previous years, Putin has been poisoning people overseas. His opponents leave Russia. They go to London, for example, and they get poisoned with uranium. Do you remember that?
Yes. It was in London, right?
It was in London. Yeah. That happened. His reach is enormous, and now this guy's dead.
So the last time we saw him was February 16th, and we probably have that video, and he was just missing. Everyone thought, is he dead? He's in a penal colony, the worst type of sentence you could serve in prison. And we didn't see him. And out of nowhere, he pops up on the 16th, and he looked terrible, at which time he had trouble even standing, Lawrence. He looked down to maybe 120 pounds. He stands about 6'3".
This guy, no matter what was thrown at him, though, he did not stop his push to make sure the world knows who Putin was. And the question is, Brian, as we get more information, we're talking to all our reporters right now, is there going to be a legitimate investigation to figure out exactly what happened?
Absolutely not. No.
And then number two, we know that's going to be a no. What would be the response from the international community on this? Number three, we already know that he's saying, there's intelligence reports about what Russia is doing. What is the U.S. going to say about this?
The only way to shut this guy up was to kill him. That's what it looks like has happened.
Right.
Constant protester against Putin. He's outspoken. He's dead.
He served 19 years behind bars.
That's extraordinary.
And this prison is a Siberian prison.
He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for parole violation linked to his conviction. They would put him in court, and they would just give another 10, another 10, another 10. And he would just be smiling, be optimistic, and he knows that there was a movement outside of the prison cell for him, kept alive by his family, and in the hope that he would get out. And for that moment, when you watched the movement of the Wagner Group to take Moscow, the first person I thought of, if Putin falls, he'd be the first guy out of prison. The last legitimate candidate to run against Vladimir Putin in 2018 was this guy, Navalny, and he was getting a lot of support.
Didn't the guy who led the Wagner Group, didn't he die too?
He shot the plane right out of the air, and then he says the Russian government had no responsibility to do that, but obviously we know differently, guys.
The New World Order, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, brutal dictatorships all, Putin fits right in.
Right. So we're following this, the death of Alexei Navalny at the age of 47 years old. Sadly, the people living under these type of harsh conditions with this lack of nutrition, with working 20 hours a day, this was almost an inevitability. He was never getting out. And think about that decision to be poisoned, go to Europe where he could have stayed safe. And then he comes back almost the moment he landed. They pick him up. They put him in jail. They have a fake trial. He goes back to jail. Each time he goes up for parole, he gets rejected, and the prison he goes to gets worse to the point where he's lost almost all contact with his family.
We're seeing that happening with our Wall Street Journal reporter. We saw that happen with Whelan as well. They come up for a trial. They stand in that clear box, and then they say, we'll talk to you again in 2 or 3 months.
I think it goes to the point, though, that Brian was making about him, even though he was poisoned and, was beaten, it goes to the point that he was a proud Russian as well. And he wanted people to know what Putin was doing to his people. And listen, I don't know what we do at this point right now from an international standpoint. Obviously, the war in Ukraine is definitely going to be brought up here. Is this the red line? Do you not let Putin keep invading? You know what his next plan after he takes Ukraine is.
It's surely a wake-up call to the Europeans.